They were newlyweds, with their entire future ahead of them, until one horrific night destroyed everything. Hello, and welcome. In this video, we plunge into a true crime story that leaves us wondering how anyone could harbor such cruelty. It's the story of Jan Pietrzak and Quiana Jenkins, a young bright couple whose love was as genuine as it was tragic. They had only just begun their lives together when an unthinkable act robbed them of every promise they'd made for the future. We will explore their backgrounds, the harrowing crime that claimed their lives, the investigation that exposed the perpetrators, and the shocking courtroom revelations that followed. We will examine how four fellow Marines, men Jan believed he could trust, turned on him and his wife in a way that defies comprehension. Let's begin. Jan Pietrzak was born in Poland on March 13, 1984. Growing up in a land where opportunities were often limited, he and his family decided to immigrate to the United States for the promise of a brighter tomorrow. When Jan was just 11 years old, they settled in the Bensonhurst neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. Life in Brooklyn offered its own challenges, adjusting to a new language, forging new friendships, and learning the flow of city life. But Jan was driven. According to those who knew him, he was determined to make the most of every chance that came his way. Brooklyn in the 1990s was a mix of cultures and energy. Jan thrived in this environment. His mother, Henryka Varga, often reminded him of their decision to come to America, emphasizing the opportunity for a better life. Jan would grow up with a deep sense of gratitude to his adopted country. In 2001, the tragic events of 9/11 shook the nation, and they especially resonated with January. At 17, he watched New York City, his new home, reel from unimaginable loss. He began talking about the military, mentioning how he wanted to defend the country that had taken him in. By 2003, he'd set those words into action by joining the U.S. Marine Corps. Jan's mother later recalled how her son said, "Mom, we live in this country. We have to be patriotic. We have to give back." This statement reflected the seriousness with which he approached his responsibilities. Boot camp demanded mental and physical toughness, but Jan excelled. His dedication won over his instructors, and in time, he became a respected helicopter mechanic. While other young Marines might struggle to adjust, Jan had already learned resilience from moving across the ocean as a boy. He embraced discipline and camaraderie, building a reputation among his peers as loyal and hardworking. Before long, he rose to the rank of sergeant, a significant achievement at his age. On the other side of the country, Quiana Jenkins was making her own life in Southern California. Born on February 16, 1982, she was the only child of Roy and Glenna Faye Jenkins. Quiana grew up in the Ontario area, a region known for its suburban feel and sunshine-laden days. From early on, she displayed a love for learning. Her parents noticed their daughter possessed a nurturing, compassionate spirit. She cared deeply about the well-being of others and showed interest in health, science, and community work. Eventually, Quiana enrolled at San Diego State University, a place she found exciting because of its diversity and academic opportunities. She thrived in college, earning a master's degree in public health by 2005. Her plan? To become a doctor. The steps along the way would include working in health education, particularly focusing on communities that often lacked access to quality care. After graduating, Quiana worked as a health education assistant for a county-wide program focused on Black infant care. It was a role she felt passionate about, believing that every child deserved the best start in life. Those who worked alongside her noted how gentle she was with families, how she patiently explained medical processes, and how she committed herself to bridging health disparities. This was Quiana, determined, caring, and ready to serve. And this was Jan, a passionate Marine sergeant, eager to protect and honor the country he'd adopted. They seemed to inhabit completely different worlds, San Diego's health education scene versus the structured life of Camp Pendleton's Marines. Yet fate had a way of bringing them together. In 2005, Quiana's circle of friends intersected with the Marine community. One of her college peers was also friends with Marines scheduled for deployment to Iraq. At a going-away celebration, Jan Pietrzak crossed paths with Quiana Jenkins. Sparks flew almost immediately, though Quiana was initially hesitant. She'd mentioned to friends that dating a Marine might be complicated: long deployments, physical risks, emotional stress, and the tension of not knowing what each day would bring when your partner is in a war zone. Despite these concerns, there was something about January. He was polite, thoughtful, and exuded a quiet confidence. He asked about her aspirations in health education, and Quiana found herself captivated by his genuine interest. Jan, for his part, quickly recognized Quiana's warmth and intelligence. Over the following weeks, they texted, called, and met whenever possible. Time was short, Jan's deployment loomed. But in those moments they shared, they built a bond. Their backgrounds were different. He was an immigrant from Poland, she a Californian with deep family roots. Their approach to life was similar, though. Both believed in service, in giving back, in standing for something bigger than themselves. Quiana overcame her initial uncertainty, telling a friend, "He's worth the risk." The two stayed connected during Jan's deployment. Letters, emails, whatever communication they could manage across thousands of miles in a war-torn environment. By the time Jan returned stateside, they were inseparable. Their friend spoke of how their love felt mature, rooted in shared values rather than fleeting attraction. Interracial couples can sometimes face added scrutiny, but Jan and Quiana didn't let outside opinions bother them. They planned their future anyway, determined to start a life built on respect, unity, and unwavering commitment. Their families were supportive, noticing how each seemed to bring out the best in the other. Jan's mother noted, they were in love. It didn't matter to them that they had different skin colors. Quiana's parents, Roy and Glenna, saw how much Jan cherished their daughter. In 2008, the couple set a wedding date, August 8, 2008. Quiana deliberately chose this date so Jan would never forget their anniversary, August 8, 2008. It was a bright summer day, and it felt like everyone's favorite fairy tale had come to life. In the 2 months after tying the knot, Jan and Quiana savored their new roles as husband and wife. Their love felt secure, and they looked forward to everything a young couple anticipates: saving for a home, possibly starting a family, building their careers, and strengthening their partnership. Quiana kept working with the county's infant care program, and Jan continued serving in the Marines, stationed at Camp Pendleton. They settled into a modest home in Riverside County, a place that offered them a bit of distance from the hustle and bustle near the base. During this time, Jan received a $30,000 bonus, a reward for his dedicated service. Friends joked that the newlyweds could travel, buy furniture, or upgrade their home. It was an exciting windfall that might have allowed them to pay off school loans or invest in the future. Jan had also earned respect within the Corps, but part of his job as a sergeant involved supervising younger Marines, a duty he took very seriously. He was known for holding subordinates to a high standard. He'd call people out if they were slacking or failing to meet obligations. Some appreciated the push, others not so much. Still, no one imagined that any bad intentions toward Jan's strict approach would escalate beyond typical workplace gripes. In fact, if you had told Quiana or Jan that they were in danger from a handful of people in his own unit, they might have laughed it off. The couple was eager and hopeful. They focused on building their own safe space where they could celebrate birthdays, host barbecues, and eventually welcome children. None of that would come to pass. Their happiness was about to be shattered. On October 15, 2008, alarms went off when neither Quiana nor Jan showed up for work. Quiana's co-workers were accustomed to her punctuality. She rarely missed a day. Jan was similarly reliable. With both failing to appear or call in, people grew worried fast. Calls to their phones went unanswered. Concerned, Quiana's colleagues contacted the police and requested a wellness check at the couple's Riverside home. It was mid-morning when an officer arrived. The front door was partially open, an immediate red flag. The officer sensed something was off. Stepping onto the threshold, he detected the potent smell of gasoline and natural gas. Uncertain if the home might be rigged with some kind of accelerant, he immediately called for backup. Additional units arrived. Slowly, methodically, they entered the home, flashlights scanning every corner. The first shocking sign was Quiana's purse, its contents spilled across the floor. This scattering of personal belongings seemed frantic and disorganized, but it was only the beginning. The smell of gas grew stronger. Then came the living room, and that's where officers found Jan and Quiana, bound and gagged on the floor, unmoving. Jan bore signs of a savage beating. Quiana had been violently assaulted, evidence pointing to a sexual attack. Both had ultimately been shot, and it appeared the crime was staged to look like a hate-fueled invasion. Racial slurs were spray-painted on walls and mirrors. Multiple small fires had been attempted but hadn't ignited properly. Even for seasoned officers, the scene was beyond brutal. The victims appeared to have endured prolonged torture. Whoever the perpetrators were, they had come prepared. They wore gloves, left footprints in gasoline, and rummaged through the house. Some valuables were missing. The crime scene suggested a methodical approach. These people had tried to obliterate evidence by setting fire to the place. It was only by chance that the fires didn't spread, preserving vital clues that would soon propel an extensive investigation. Once the horrifying details came to light, Riverside Police launched a major homicide investigation. They brought in specialized teams to examine footprints, ballistic evidence, and the presence of accelerants. They also interviewed neighbors to see if anyone had noticed suspicious activity. Early speculation leaned toward a hate crime because of the racial slurs scattered everywhere. Jan was white, Quiana black. But detectives also recognized other angles. Jan's recent bonus, rumored to be $30,000, might have made him a target for robbery. A crucial piece of the puzzle emerged when investigators discovered that Quiana's ATM card had been used shortly after the murders at a nearby bank machine. Surveillance footage revealed a person wearing gloves with distinctive markings and a blue bandana partially covering their face. The location was only half a mile from the Camp Pendleton base entrance. This was a massive clue. Someone within that radius might be involved. Local authorities decided to collaborate with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS, to leverage expertise in military-related cases. Immediately, NCIS made a telling observation at the crime scene. While electronics, jewelry, and other valuables appeared missing, one potentially prized item, a Marine sea bag, remained untouched. Among Marines, a sea bag is standard issue. If criminals were desperate for loot, why ignore that? NCIS investigators concluded, only people who already have their own sea bag wouldn't bother taking that. The logic pointed to fellow Marines. With the ATM usage near Camp Pendleton and the possibility that the suspects had Marine Corps training, this theory gained traction quickly. Police interviews began with colleagues of Jan and Quiana. Coworkers of Jan described him as no-nonsense, a stickler for following protocol. He was known to be direct with subordinates who slacked off. Among those subordinates, one name kept coming up, Tyrone Miller, a young Marine corporal who reportedly had tense run-ins with January. Not only did Miller appear disgruntled toward his superior, but he'd also drawn extra attention by getting shot in a supposed drive-by incident right before Jan and Quiana's funeral. An odd coincidence, to say the least. When detectives questioned Miller, he initially claimed he had no involvement in the murders. He said he and Jan disagreed about small work issues, but it was nothing major. However, when detectives mentioned phone record tracking, Miller's story shifted. He admitted driving through Jan and Quiana's neighborhood around the time of the crime. Curiously, he volunteered that he and his friends sometimes wore blue bandanas. He also mentioned wearing Nike Air Force One sneakers, matching footprints found at the murder scene. This was more than enough to secure a search warrant. Within hours, authorities arrived at Miller's home. They knocked. No response. Moments later, they forced the door open. Inside, they found Miller's wife in one part of the house and Miller himself holding up his toddler daughter as a shield. The audacity of using his own child in that manner stunned the officers. They demanded he put her down. Eventually, he complied, and the search began. It didn't take long for investigators to hit what they called the mother lode of evidence. Right on a table sat Quiana's ATM card, the very one used after the murders. Nearby were items belonging to the victims, including jewelry and personal possessions. Further searches uncovered spent shell casings, Jan's dress blue uniform, something deeply significant to Marines, multiple firearms, one matching the murder weapon, gloves matching those in the ATM footage, and a stash of blue bandanas. It was overwhelming proof tying Miller to the crime. They also found random IDs, presumably stolen from other burglaries. This was no simple, isolated robbery. Investigators realized Miller might have been part of a broader pattern of home invasions. With all this evidence, Miller was arrested on the spot. During subsequent questioning, confronted with undeniable proof, he began to talk, albeit selectively. He admitted some involvement, but tried shifting blame onto others. He listed 3 more names, all Marines. Emery's John, 18 years old. Kevin Cox, 20 years old. Kishon Psycho Sykes, 21 years old. All 4 were stationed at Camp Pendleton, and all served under or alongside January. According to Miller, they were with him that fateful night, but insisted he didn't pull the trigger. Investigators then rounded up John, Cox, and Sykes for their own interrogations. Each of them pointed fingers at the others for the more egregious acts: the sexual assault, the torture, the murder. Yet the forensic trail plus phone records and each suspect's partial confessions soon painted a dreadful picture of what truly happened in the early hours of October 15th. Through evidence and interrogations, authorities reconstructed the plan. The 4 Marines believed Jan's home contained valuables, specifically cash from his $30,000 bonus. There was also talk of getting back at Jan for being a strict sergeant who, rumor had it, was blocking certain promotions. This rumor had no factual basis, but the men used it as justification for their rage. They armed themselves with guns, gloves, and bandanas to hide their identities. They dressed in a way that wouldn't draw attention in the dark. Their intention was to silently break in, catch Jan and Quiana off guard, and force them to reveal where valuables were stored. When quiet entry proved difficult, they switched tactics. They decided that Kevin Cox, whom Jan recognized, would knock on the door. If Jan saw a familiar face, he might open it without alarm. That's exactly what happened. Jan answered, suspicious enough to hold a knife, but not expecting a full-blown ambush. Once the door cracked open, the others rushed in at gunpoint. Jan struggled briefly, but the men overpowered him. They found Quiana and restrained her too. Both were bound and gagged. The men ransacked the house, but didn't find the stash of money they imagined. Enraged, they demanded Quiana's ATM pin. They inflicted pain to force the information from her. 2 of them committed the unthinkable. They sexually violated Quiana in front of January. It was a deliberate act of domination, meant to degrade the couple and break them psychologically. Having secured Quiana's pin, they realized they couldn't leave potential witnesses behind, especially someone they knew. January multiple statements indicated Emery's John ultimately pulled the trigger, though each suspect tried to dodge responsibility. Jan and Quiana were shot dead. The perpetrators then spray-painted racial slurs to divert suspicion toward a hate crime. Before leaving, they attempted to burn down the house with gasoline to destroy evidence. Fortunately, the fire never took hold. 1 or more of the group then hurried to an ATM near Camp Pendleton to withdraw cash using Quiana's card. That's where security cameras captured crucial footage of the suspect's bandana and gloves. Over the next few days, these 4 men returned to their usual routines, believing they'd concealed their tracks, until Tyrone Miller's questionable drive-by shooting story and a wave of evidence turned everything upside down. As the men were interrogated, more troubling details came to light. Detectives found that Emery's John had posted a cryptic statement on his MySpace page referring to waiting for a moment to kill, suggesting premeditation. Some boasted to acquaintances about what they'd done, though they framed it as a successful robbery. Others downplayed their roles, claiming they were just following along. Evidence pointed to the group's involvement in other burglaries or home invasions, one of which led to Miller's suspicious bullet wound. In the court of public opinion, people were aghast that men wearing the uniform of the Marine Corps could commit such atrocities. On base, fellow Marines felt betrayed. It wasn't just about 4 men tarnishing the Corps. It was about the vile betrayal of one of their own. Jan's mother tearfully expressed that she always feared her son could die in Iraq, not on American soil by people who called themselves Marines. While the investigation advanced, Jan and Quiana were laid to rest on October 24, 2008. Jan's mother and Quiana's parents decided the couple should be buried side by side. Their vow had been to spend their lives together, and although that life was cut short, their family saw fit to honor their union in burial. Both received the honor of a full military funeral, reflecting Jan's service in the Marine Corps. The ceremony included a 21-gun salute, traditionally reserved for those who served their country. For many, it was a moment of crushing grief and pride all at once. Pride for Jan's service, pride for Quiana's devotion to bettering public health, and heartbreak over the monstrous way they were taken. Fellow Marines who attended said the sorrow was palpable. Some wept openly, unable to reconcile the idea of semper fi with the betrayal that ended Jan's life. The case, now unstoppable, churned through the courts. By 2013, nearly 5 years after the murders, prosecutors were ready to bring 3 of the defendants, Tyrone Miller, Emery's John, and Kevin Cox, to trial simultaneously. The fourth, Kishon Psycho Sykes, would be tried separately a year later due to limited court resources. All 4 suspects had long since been dishonorably discharged from the Marine Corps. They faced multiple charges, 2 counts of first-degree murder, plus special circumstances like committing murder during a robbery, sexual assault, and kidnapping. In California, these enhancements often make defendants eligible for the death penalty. Prosecutor Daniel de Leon made a point to remind the jury that these were trained military personnel, not civilians with no background in firearms or tactics. They used their training to plan the ambush, subdue the victims, and attempt to erase evidence. During the trial, prosecutors described how Jan and Quiana endured hours of horror. Witnesses recounted how the suspects bragged afterward, some praising Emery's John for earning his stripes after shooting the couple. The displays of callousness repulsed the courtroom. Family members of the victims gave emotional testimony about the couple's character, while investigators laid out the brutal timeline with forensic clarity. The defense teams tried various strategies. Some claimed their clients were only there for a robbery, never intending murder. Others alleged they felt coerced by the group's ringleaders, Miller or Sykes. Such excuses fell apart under the weight of the physical evidence and contradictory statements. By the end of a 4-month trial, the jury deliberated for less than 3 days, a swift verdict for such a complex case. Miller was found guilty, with the jury concluding he not only participated in the robbery, but also committed sexual assault. John was identified as the shooter and found guilty of first-degree murder. Cox was found guilty but did not directly commit the rape or pull the trigger. Sykes, in a later trial, was also found guilty of first-degree murder, with additional convictions for sexual assault and using a foreign object. Despite small differences in the precise charges, each faced severe consequences. Miller, John, and Sykes landed on death row, while Cox received life imprisonment without parole. The outcomes underscored the legal system's view of the crime as one of extreme depravity. California is known for lengthy appeals in death penalty cases, and in 2019, Governor Gavin Newsom declared a moratorium on all executions. That means while death sentences stand on the books, they're not actively carried out. As of the time of making this video, Tyrone Miller, Emery's John, and Kishon Sykes remain on death row at San Quentin State Prison, the oldest institution in California and the place where all male death row inmates reside. It is notorious for its complicated layout and houses many of the state's most dangerous offenders. Meanwhile, Kevin Cox is serving life without parole at Chuckawalla Valley State Prison, a medium-security facility. Reports indicate Chuckawalla often operates well over capacity, meaning inmates endure cramped conditions. Cox, unlike those on death row, will blend into the general prison population to some extent. But in a practical sense, none of the 4 killers will ever taste freedom again. Jan Pietrzak and Quiana Jenkins were both in their mid-20s. They shared a desire to serve communities, Jan as a protector of American freedom, Quiana as a nurturer of public health. They married on a date easy to remember, August 8, 2008, so they could celebrate that anniversary for decades. They never got to celebrate even one. In the final analysis, they were robbed of their future by men Jan tried to lead and train. Loved ones described them with fondness and admiration. Jan's mother recalled how she braced herself for the possibility that her son might die overseas in Iraq. But she never expected him to die in his own home, near a base he served, at the hands of Marines he once guided. Quiana's parents lament that they never had the chance to see their daughter become a doctor or a mother. Sometimes, it's the smallest things that hurt the most. The half-finished household projects they left behind, the wedding gifts still unopened, the untouched wedding cake top they planned to eat on their first anniversary. They rest together at Riverside National Cemetery, united even in death. Their families arranged this with the hope that in the afterlife, they would continue the love story so brutally interrupted on Earth. It's a final testament to the belief that, despite everything, love remains stronger than hate. The case stands as a reminder that sometimes evil comes from those we least suspect. Jan and Quiana were unsuspecting newlyweds, forging a path together. The savage brutality inflicted on them questions our assumptions about where danger lurks, even within institutions known for discipline and honor. Jan Pietrzak and Quiana Jenkins believed in service, love, and unity. Their story has become a symbol for many, showing how precious life can be and how devastating betrayal is when it emerges from those within one's own ranks. The loss ripples through family, friends, colleagues, and entire communities, leaving behind a legacy of sorrow and unanswered questions. Now, here's my question for you. Do you believe the death penalty, or even life in prison, is sufficient to bring justice for what Jan and Quiana endured, or does this crime demand a different kind of reckoning? Please share your thoughts in the comments below.